Human shields the alien girl from enemy blades, and the alien girl says one blade turned away from him. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main characters. Alex, a young man with a sharp sense of duty, never imagined that his life would change so drastically on that fateful day. He had always been a simple guy, living in a small town, trying to make a living as a mechanic. But everything changed the moment he found himself face to face with Lyra, an alien girl from a distant galaxy. At first, it was all so surreal. She appeared out of nowhere, a being from beyond the stars, lost and confused. But Alex, ever the protector, took her in without hesitation. She was fragile, and though she had strange abilities, she didn't seem to understand Earth's ways, nor the danger that surrounded her. The world they now lived in was anything but peaceful. Wars had raged across the stars, and remnants of those battles had found their way to Earth. Lyra was a key figure in an intergalactic conflict, and now, as a consequence, Alex found himself fighting to keep her safe from forces he didn't fully understand. Today, as they were walking through the town square, an attack came without warning. Figures in black armor, wielding shimmering blades, charged at them from every direction. It was chaos. Alex's heart raced as he instinctively stepped in front of Lyra, blocking the first incoming strike. The blade hissed through the air, narrowly missing his face as he pushed Lyra back behind him. His instincts kicked in, but this wasn't just any fight. The attackers were skilled, and Alex was outmatched. But something inside him refused to give up. With every blade that came close, Alex shielded Lyra, his movements becoming more desperate, more protective. As the battle intensified, Lyra, though initially paralyzed by fear, realized she could no longer stand idly by. The feeling of Alex's protective presence gave her strength, and she knew she had to help. With a sudden burst of energy, she stretched out her hand, her alien powers manifesting in the form of a brilliant, glowing shield that deflected one of the blades heading directly toward Alex. The blade spun away, harmlessly sliding across the ground. Alex turned to her in surprise, his eyes wide with disbelief. One blade turned away from him, Lyra said softly, her voice trembling, but filled with a quiet strength. It was her way of acknowledging her own power, but more importantly, her way of expressing her gratitude. Alex, stunned, realized that in this moment, they weren't just two beings from different worlds. They were allies, bound together by something much stronger than fate. The fight was far from over, but in that brief moment, they shared an unspoken bond, a promise to protect each other at all costs. The fight continued, and the air was thick with tension. Alex and Lyra stood side by side, facing the oncoming storm of enemies. Despite their combined efforts, they knew they were only holding their ground for the moment. The enemy soldiers were relentless, each one wielding a blade that gleamed with a deadly light, but Alex's protective instincts never wavered. He had no formal training in combat, but his resolve was stronger than any sword. His body was his shield, his movements fueled by a deep sense of responsibility for Lyra. He couldn't explain why, but he had to keep her safe. Lyra, on the other hand, had powers beyond anything Alex could comprehend. The energy that flowed through her was otherworldly, powerful, and she was just beginning to tap into it. She had never experienced Earth's gravity or atmosphere before, and everything was overwhelming. Yet, in that moment, with Alex standing beside her, she felt stronger, more capable than ever. The soldiers advanced with precision, cutting through the air with their blades. One of them lunged at Alex, aiming for his chest. In an instant, Lyra raised her hand, and a pulse of light shot forward, deflecting the blade away from Alex. She was still getting used to her abilities, but her actions were becoming more instinctive. Alex glanced at her, astonished. That was amazing, he said, his voice barely audible over the sounds of clashing blades. Lyra nodded, though she was still unsure of what had just happened. Her alien physiology was unlike anything he had ever encountered, and every new development left him in awe. Together, they were forming a bond that went beyond their differences. They were no longer just a human and an alien, they were partners. But just as they started to think they might have the upper hand, a new enemy emerged from the shadows. A tall figure clad in dark armor, unlike anything Alex had seen before, stepped forward. The other soldiers quickly backed away, forming a circle around him. This new opponent exuded an aura of authority, and the air seemed to shift when he entered. His helmet was sleek and menacing, his eyes hidden beneath a dark visor. He raised his weapon, a massive, double-edged blade that seemed to hum with energy. Enough, the figure bellowed, his voice carrying across the battlefield. The enemy soldiers fell into silence, their weapons lowered in obedience. Alex could feel the weight of this new presence, and he instinctively stepped closer to Lyra, ready to protect her at all costs. Lyra, too, felt the change in the atmosphere. This was no ordinary soldier. This was someone with power, someone dangerous. She didn't know who he was or what he wanted, but she could sense that he was the key to understanding why the enemy had come for her in the first place. The figure slowly raised his weapon and pointed it directly at Alex. "Step aside, human," he commanded, his tone cold and authoritative. "She belongs to us." Alex's heart raced, but he didn't budge. "Not happening," he said, his voice steady, despite the fear creeping into his chest. Lyra's hand rested on his shoulder, her touch reassuring. She didn't know what the man wanted, but she wasn't going anywhere without Alex. The tension between them was palpable, and as the seconds ticked by, the fate of both worlds seemed to hang in the balance. This was no longer just about survival, it was about standing up against the forces that threatened to tear everything apart. The figure before them, a towering presence cloaked in dark armor, remained silent for a moment. His eyes, hidden behind the visor of his helmet, seemed to pierce through the very air around him. Alex could feel the weight of his gaze, even though he couldn't see his face. The threat was real, and it was clear that this man wasn't just any soldier, he was a commander, a leader. His voice had the power to command, and Alex knew that every word he said carried the weight of authority. "I said step aside," the figure repeated, his voice unwavering, like the deep rumble of thunder before a storm. Alex stood his ground, his chest rising and falling with each breath, his hand instinctively reaching for the knife at his belt. It was all he had in terms of weapons, and though it was no match for the enormous blade the stranger wielded, it was all he could offer. "She's not yours to take," Alex responded, his voice steady but carrying the rawness of his resolve. The commander's helmet tilted slightly, as though considering Alex's words. Then, without warning, he made a sudden move. His blade swept through the air with a fluid motion, a bright shimmer of energy radiating from its edge. Alex's heart skipped a beat as he braced for the inevitable impact. But before the blade could make contact, a surge of power shot out from Lyra, surrounding her in a protective aura. The air seemed to crackle with energy as the invisible force pushed the commander back a few steps. Alex's eyes widened in disbelief. Lyra had done it again. Her alien powers were growing stronger with every moment. She stood there, her expression focused but determined, her hand raised in front of her as if to shield both herself and Alex from the imminent danger. The commander staggered, momentarily thrown off balance by the unexpected surge of power. His eyes flashed with something that could only be described as surprise mixed with irritation. He had not expected this. "You are more powerful than I thought," the commander said, his voice tinged with annoyance, but also a hint of admiration. "But you still do not understand. You are playing a dangerous game, human." Alex didn't flinch. His thoughts raced, trying to figure out what the commander meant. Dangerous game? What was he talking about? Was Lyra's power the key to some greater conflict? He didn't have time to ask. The commander's voice shifted, now cold and commanding. "It doesn't matter," he said. "You won't stop us. We will take her back, whether you like it or not." Lyra's gaze met Alex's, and in that moment, without a single word spoken, they both knew what had to be done. The fight was far from over, but neither of them was willing to back down. They had come this far together, and they weren't going to let anyone take Lyra from him, not now, not ever. Alex tightened his grip on the knife, his heart pounding in his chest. This was it. No matter the odds, no matter the power standing before him, he would protect her. He had made a promise, and he wasn't about to break it. Lyra's eyes glowed with a faint light as she drew in a deep breath. She wasn't sure what was coming next, but she trusted Alex completely. They were in this together, and they would fight until the very end. The tension between them thickened, and for a moment, everything seemed to freeze. The commander's imposing figure remained unmoving, his dark armor gleaming ominously under the light of the distant stars. Alex, standing beside Lyra, felt every muscle in his body tense. His mind raced, but there was no plan, only the raw desire to protect the girl who had become more than just a stranger to him. Lyra, sensing the urgency, stepped closer to him, her eyes never leaving the commander. Despite the fear that lingered in the back of her mind, she felt a surge of power coursing through her veins, her connection to her home world, her people, and most of all, to Alex. It was like the universe itself was aligning, pulling them together to face this unknown adversary. The commander tilted his head slightly, studying the two of them, and then spoke again, his voice no longer a mere command, but a chilling proclamation. "You cannot hide her forever. The galaxy is vast, and we will find her, wherever she goes. The war is bigger than you, human. You have no idea what you're dealing with." Alex's heart pounded in his chest. The implications of the commander's words hit him hard. The war he spoke of wasn't just a distant memory, it was real, and Lyra was right at the center of it. A feeling of dread began to settle in his stomach, but he refused to let it overpower him. "I'm not letting you take her," Alex said firmly, his voice full of conviction. His grip tightened around his knife, a symbol of the determination he felt deep within. Lyra's eyes softened as she placed a hand gently on his arm. Her touch reassuring. She knew this moment was crucial, and despite her own doubts, she felt more connected to Alex than ever before. "I won't let them take me either, Alex," she said, her voice steady, though the weight of her own responsibility pressed down on her shoulders. The commander's eyes narrowed, a flicker of irritation crossing his face. He had underestimated them both. With a sudden, swift movement, he raised his hand, signaling for his soldiers to advance once more. But before they could take another step, Lyra stepped forward, her body glowing with a soft, ethereal light. Alex watched in awe as the energy emanating from her seemed to ripple through the air, pushing back the soldiers who dared approach. The commander hesitated, clearly taken aback by the force Lyra was able to summon. He took a cautious step back, reassessing the situation. "Interesting," he muttered, clearly intrigued by the power Lyra wielded. "But it's still not enough." The air around them vibrated with the intensity of the confrontation, the future uncertain and hanging in the balance. Alex knew they couldn't win this fight by force alone, there had to be another way. He looked at Lyra, his eyes filled with determination. "We need to leave now," he said quietly, the urgency in his voice impossible to miss. Lyra nodded, understanding immediately. Together, they turned and began to move, swiftly but cautiously, toward the outskirts of the battlefield. Every step felt like an eternity, and though they were still being pursued, they knew that they had a chance to escape, to find safety and a way to turn the tide in their favor. As they moved through the shadows, Alex kept his senses sharp, every nerve alert to the danger that still loomed. The commander's voice echoed faintly behind them. "This isn't over," he called out. "We will find you. And when we do, there will be no escape." The chilling words only spurred Alex forward. He had no idea what the future held, but he knew one thing for sure, as long as he had Lyra by his side, he would fight until the very end. As Alex and Lyra moved deeper into the shadows, their surroundings grew quieter. The echoes of the commander's voice faded, but the sense of danger remained. Every step they took felt like a gamble, a delicate balance between escape and being caught. Alex kept his eyes fixed ahead, his senses alert to any signs of pursuit. The narrow alleyways and dense trees offered some cover, but they could not stay hidden forever. Lyra, walking beside him, felt the weight of the moment as well. She could still feel the power surging within her, an energy that had once been foreign to her but was now becoming a part of who she was. Yet, despite the power she possessed, the fear of what the commander had said lingered in the back of her mind. He had warned them, and he had meant it. The words, "There will be no escape," echoed in her thoughts, and she couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. They had barely escaped the battlefield, but that didn't mean they were safe. Alex's voice broke through her thoughts, calm but filled with urgency. "We need to find shelter, somewhere safe to regroup." Lyra nodded, her eyes scanning their surroundings. "There's a small cabin nearby," she said, pointing toward a distant hill. "It's hidden, and it might give us some time to plan." Without hesitation, they changed course, moving toward the cabin Lyra had mentioned. As they walked, Alex couldn't help but notice the quiet strength in her. She had come so far since he first found her, unsure and lost. Now, she was not just a survivor, she was a force to be reckoned with. Still, he knew that her power, while impressive, wasn't enough to defeat the forces chasing them. They needed a plan, and quickly. When they reached the cabin, Alex pushed open the creaky wooden door, his hand still on the knife at his belt. The cabin was small but well hidden, surrounded by thick trees that obscured it from any outside view. Inside, the air was cool and musty, and the only light came from a few cracks in the wooden walls. It wasn't much, but it would have to do for now. Lyra went to a small table in the corner and began to examine a series of maps she had brought with her, though she wasn't sure how much help they would be. She had no idea where they could go to truly escape, and the stakes were higher than ever. Alex sat down across from her, his expression pensive. "We can't keep running forever. We need to figure out where to go next." Lyra looked up, her face thoughtful. "I think I know a place. It's far from here, hidden in a different dimension. But it's risky. The commanders have ways of tracking me, even across dimensions." Alex's heart skipped a beat. A different dimension? He had heard stories, of course, but never thought he would be part of one. But if it meant safety, he would follow her anywhere. "How do we get there?" he asked. Lyra's eyes met his, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she smiled. It wasn't a joyful smile, but it was a sign of hope. "I can take us there. But it's not going to be easy. We'll need to be quick, and we'll have to leave everything behind. We won't be able to come back." Alex nodded without hesitation. "Let's do it." He didn't know what awaited them on the other side of this unknown world, but he knew one thing for sure: as long as they were together, they would face whatever came next. And whatever dangers lay ahead, they would confront them side by side. The weight of the decision settled between them, but neither of them was afraid. The only thing that mattered was getting away and finding a way to stop the forces that were hunting Lyra. It was time to leave everything behind and step into the unknown. As Alex and Lyra stood in the dimly lit cabin, the weight of the decision they had just made settled heavily in the air. The idea of stepping into a new dimension, a place they knew little about, was daunting, but it was the only option left. Lyra had always been reluctant to reveal too much about her powers, especially when it came to the ability to shift between worlds. But now, there was no choice. They had to move quickly. The cabin felt too small, too vulnerable. Outside, the night seemed to stretch on forever, and Alex could feel the chill in the air, a reminder that time was running out. They couldn't stay here long. "Are you ready?" Lyra's voice was calm, but Alex could hear the underlying tension. He nodded without hesitation. He didn't fully understand what was about to happen, but he trusted her. More than anything, he trusted her to know what was best. Lyra took a deep breath, her hands resting lightly on the table. Her eyes closed for a brief moment as she gathered her focus, summoning the energy within her. The air around them began to hum with a low, vibrating sound, like the distant rumble of thunder before a storm. Alex stepped closer to her, his heart racing as he watched her powers begin to manifest. The walls of the cabin seemed to shimmer, and the space around them felt like it was bending, twisting in a way that was both beautiful and unsettling. "Hold on tight," Lyra said softly, her voice steady but urgent. Alex did not question her. He reached out, taking her hand in his. The moment their hands touched, the world around them seemed to collapse in on itself. The air around them grew thick, heavy, as though they were being pulled into a different reality entirely. A burst of light exploded in all directions, and Alex felt a sharp tug at his chest, as if he were being yanked from his body. The world blurred, and for a moment, he couldn't see or hear anything. Then, just as suddenly, everything stopped. The sensation of being torn between two places faded, and the world around them settled into something new. They were no longer in the cabin. The familiar surroundings of the earth they had known were gone. In their place was a vast, open landscape, bathed in an eerie glow. The sky above them was a strange shade of purple, streaked with lines of gold that flickered like distant stars. The ground beneath their feet was soft, almost like sand, but it shimmered as though it were made of something far more intricate. Alex blinked in disbelief. He had heard of other dimensions, but nothing could have prepared him for the reality of it. This world was unlike anything he had ever seen. "This is it," Lyra said, her voice filled with a quiet awe. "This is my world, or at least one of its many forms." Alex turned to her, trying to take in everything around them. He had always been a practical person, grounded in the reality of everyday life. But now, standing in a place that defied logic, he had no choice but to accept that the rules of the world he knew no longer applied. He squeezed Lyra's hand, silently reassuring her. "We're not alone here, are we?" he asked, already knowing the answer. Lyra's eyes darted around, scanning the landscape. "No," she said, her voice low. "We're not alone." The calmness of her words did nothing to ease the tension rising within Alex. He had no idea what dangers lurked in this strange new world, but one thing was certain, they were still being hunted. The commanders would not stop. He could feel the urgency building once again. "What now?" he asked. Lyra's expression hardened, her eyes narrowing. "Now, we find a way to survive." She looked ahead, her eyes set on the horizon. "And we make sure they don't find us." With that, they began to move forward, taking their first steps into a world that was as alien as it was beautiful. Every step felt like a step into the unknown, but Alex knew that with Lyra by his side, he could face whatever came next. Together, they would navigate this strange new world and fight to survive, no matter the cost. As they walked through the strange new landscape, the unfamiliar terrain stretched before them, both beautiful and unsettling. The ground beneath their feet seemed to shimmer as they moved, like grains of sand caught in the light of a strange sun. Alex couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, though the landscape seemed utterly empty. The distant horizon was jagged, full of towering spires that loomed like dark sentinels against the purple sky. There were no sounds, no birds, no rustling of leaves, only the quiet hum of the world around them. It was as though the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Lyra moved confidently at his side, her expression focused. She seemed to sense something he couldn't, an awareness of the world around them that made him feel both safe and anxious at the same time. Despite the otherworldly beauty, Alex knew that this place wasn't free from danger. The commanders had followed them, and they wouldn't rest until they had found Lyra. "Do you feel that?" Lyra asked, breaking the silence. Alex looked at her, his brow furrowed. "Feel what?" Lyra glanced around, her eyes narrowing as if trying to pinpoint something in the distance. "There's something here. Something, Ancient, she said. It's watching us. Alex's heart skipped a beat. He had been so focused on escaping the immediate threat of the commanders that he hadn't considered what might await them in this new world. He swallowed hard, trying to keep his fear in check. What do we do? Lyra didn't answer immediately. Instead, she closed her eyes for a moment, reaching out with her senses. Alex watched her, the quiet intensity of the moment weighing on him. She seemed to be tapping into something, a deep well of power that he couldn't fully comprehend. We keep moving, she said finally, her voice calm but resolute. The energy here is different from anything I've ever felt. It's ancient, and it's tied to this world. But we can't stay in one place for too long. Alex nodded, understanding the urgency in her tone. As they moved forward, the eerie silence around them seemed to intensify, the weight of the air growing heavier with each step. The landscape shifted as they walked, the ground beneath them changing from soft, shimmering sand to solid rock, cracked and uneven. In the distance, they could see a strange, glowing formation, a cluster of crystalline structures that seemed to pulse with an inner light. Lyra's eyes lit up with recognition. That's it, she said, her voice filled with a mix of hope and wariness. That's the gateway. Alex's curiosity piqued, but his anxiety grew as well. A gateway? To what? And how did Lyra know about it? What is it? He asked, his voice low. It's a portal, Lyra explained. A way to move between worlds. But we can't just step through it. It requires an offering, a sacrifice of sorts. Alex's stomach turned at the thought of what kind of sacrifice Lyra might be referring to. What do we have to give? He asked, his voice tight. Lyra hesitated for a moment, looking at the glowing crystals with a mixture of reverence and caution. It's not something physical, she said softly. It's something more, personal. A part of you, a connection you have to this world. It's the only way to make it work. Alex's mind raced as he tried to make sense of her words. A sacrifice, something personal. He had never imagined that the dangers they faced would require something like this. But Lyra was serious, and he trusted her. I'll do it, he said, his voice steady. Whatever it takes. Lyra looked at him, her eyes filled with gratitude and sadness. I don't want you to have to do this, she whispered. But we don't have a choice. Together, they approached the portal, the air around them buzzing with energy. Alex took a deep breath, steeling himself for whatever was to come. He didn't know what he was about to sacrifice, but he knew one thing for sure, he would do whatever it took to protect Lyra, to help her escape the forces that sought to destroy her. With his hand outstretched, he stepped closer to the portal, ready to face the unknown. As Alex reached out toward the glowing portal, the air around them seemed to vibrate with an intensity that was almost overwhelming. The crystal formations pulsed softly, casting eerie, colorful reflections on the surrounding landscape. The feeling of otherworldly power was palpable, and Alex could feel it pulling at him, urging him forward. He turned to look at Lyra one last time, searching her face for any sign of doubt. She met his gaze, her expression filled with both determination and a deep sadness that made his heart ache. Are you sure about this? Alex asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lyra nodded, her eyes steady, though the weight of the moment was clear. There's no other way, she replied softly. This is the only chance we have. Alex took a deep breath and stepped forward, his hand trembling slightly as it hovered just above the shimmering surface of the portal. For a brief moment, he hesitated, his mind racing with the enormity of what was happening. He had never imagined that his life would come to this, standing in a strange, alien world, about to make some kind of sacrifice to escape the forces chasing them. But as his fingers brushed against the glowing crystal, the air seemed to hum louder, and he felt an overwhelming sense of urgency. Let's do this, he murmured to himself, then to Lyra. Without another word, he pushed his hand through the portal. The moment his hand crossed the threshold, a rush of energy surged through his body. It was unlike anything he had ever felt, both exhilarating and terrifying, as though he were being pulled apart and reassembled in the blink of an eye. The ground beneath his feet seemed to disappear, and for a brief moment, he felt weightless. Then, just as suddenly, everything shifted. Alex's senses exploded into overdrive, as though he were in a different place entirely. The air felt different, thicker, warmer, and the strange energy that had enveloped the portal now seemed to be flowing through him, connecting him to something greater. He felt it in his very bones. As his vision cleared, he realized that he and Lyra had been transported to another realm. It wasn't just a different world, it was a different layer of reality, a place that defied everything he thought he knew about the universe. The sky above them was no longer the purple hue they had seen before. Instead, it was a deep shade of blue, dotted with what seemed like countless stars, though they were far closer than any stars he had ever seen. The landscape around them was vast and alien, stretching as far as the eye could see, with twisted, jagged mountains rising in the distance and strange plant-like structures that seemed to grow out of the very ground itself. Everything around them shimmered with an almost surreal glow, as if the world was alive with energy. Lyra stood beside him, her face a mixture of awe and caution as she took in their new surroundings. "We made it," she said, her voice a mix of relief and uncertainty. "But we're not out of danger yet." Alex glanced around, his heart still pounding. The world around them seemed peaceful at first glance, but he knew better than to trust appearances. He had no idea what kind of creatures or dangers lurked in this place, but he could feel the weight of the unknown pressing down on them. They weren't alone here. They couldn't afford to relax. "So what now?" Alex asked, turning to her. Lyra looked ahead, her expression hardening with resolve. "Now, we find shelter," she said firmly. "We need to stay hidden and figure out our next move." Alex nodded, taking one last look at the portal behind them before it faded into the distance. They had crossed over into a new world, but the fight was far from over. The commanders would follow them, and this strange new realm would be their battleground. It was just the beginning of the next chapter in their journey, and Alex was ready for whatever came next. He wasn't alone, and that was all that mattered. As Alex and Lyra moved deeper into this unfamiliar world, they kept a cautious pace, their senses heightened. The landscape, though breathtaking, felt unnervingly silent, almost too still. The strange, glowing structures around them cast soft, shifting lights, painting the ground in surreal hues. Every step they took felt like it echoed through the vastness, despite the stillness. Alex couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, though there was no sign of life. "This place is too quiet," Alex murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. Lyra nodded, her gaze scanning their surroundings. "It's a safe zone," she said, her tone cautious. "But it's not without its dangers. There are areas where the energy is more concentrated, where things, entities, live." She didn't need to say more. Alex understood. This place was not just a different world, it was alive with ancient, powerful forces. He could feel it in his bones, a tingling sensation at the edges of his awareness. It wasn't just the energy he felt, it was the presence of something older, something that had been here long before they arrived. They walked in silence for a while, the weight of their situation hanging heavy between them. They had escaped the immediate danger of the commanders, but this new world was full of its own unknowns. Every shadow, every flicker of light, made Alex's heart race a little faster. "What happens now?" he asked quietly, breaking the silence. Lyra's expression was one of deep concentration. "We need to find shelter, something to protect us from the more unpredictable elements of this world. There's a place, a structure, deep within the forest. It should provide us with the cover we need to plan our next move." Alex nodded, though doubt lingered in his mind. A structure? In this alien world? He couldn't quite wrap his mind around it, but he trusted Lyra. She knew more about this place than he did, and if she said it was their best chance, then it was. As they walked, the world around them seemed to shift. The glowing plants that dotted the landscape began to pulse more intensely, casting long shadows in every direction. The air grew thicker, more tangible, as if it was charged with something that made Alex's skin prickle. "Stay close," Lyra murmured, her voice barely audible. "We're close now, but the energy is fluctuating. We don't want to get too close to the core of the power here." Alex felt the change in the atmosphere as well. The ground beneath his feet seemed to hum, the very earth vibrating with an unspoken force. The trees ahead loomed larger, their twisted branches reaching like hands toward the sky. It was both beautiful and intimidating. As they ventured deeper into the forest, the air grew dense, the trees tighter together, creating a canopy that filtered the light into strange patterns. Lyra's footsteps were light and sure, while Alex's were heavier, as though the weight of the unknown world pressed down on him. Finally, they reached the structure Lyra had mentioned. It wasn't what Alex had expected. It was a massive, ancient-looking structure, partially overgrown with vines, with walls that seemed to shift and pulse with the same eerie glow as the landscape. It looked like something out of a dream, or a nightmare. "This is it," Lyra said, her voice soft but determined. She approached the structure cautiously, her hand outstretched. The moment her fingers brushed against the surface, a low hum resonated from the walls. Alex watched, unsure of what to expect. "What's happening?" he asked, his voice tense. "It's recognizing us," Lyra replied, her eyes bright with recognition. "It knows who I am. This is the first step." The walls of the structure shifted, parting to reveal an entrance. As they stepped inside, the air was cooler, the environment calmer. The inside was dark, but the glow from outside filtered through, illuminating intricate patterns on the walls. It was unlike anything Alex had ever seen. It was both ancient and alive, as if it had been waiting for them. Lyra turned to him, her expression serious. "We've bought ourselves some time, but we can't stay here long. The commanders will track us. This place won't hold them off forever." Alex nodded, his mind already racing. They were in a safe haven for now, but the battle was far from over. The real test was yet to come. What lay ahead in this strange world, and how would they survive the dangers that lurked in the unknown? Only time would tell, but one thing was certain: together, they would face whatever came next.